ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the special lecture today. Today we are very honored to invite Dr. Michael Crow, the president of Arizona State University, to give us a lecture. Now let's welcome Dr. Crow.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and it's really a great pleasure for me, an honor for me this morning to welcome President Michael Crow to our academy and give us his lecture. And President Michael Crow became the president of Arizona State University in 2002, and he has guided the university, a huge transformation of the university, to become one of the major public metropolitan research university of the country, actually of the world, and one that is directly engaged in the economic, social, and cultural vitality of the state, of the region. And under his direction, the university pursues teaching, research, and creative excellence focused on major challenges and questions of our society, of our time. And he is also one of the leading experts, leading promoters for research in sustainability development. And he has committed the university to global engagement and to setting a new standard for public service. And in 2009, he was chosen by Times as one of the best 10 university professors in the United States. President, yeah, excuse me, yeah. I myself have known Michael for many years, since mid-1990s. And many of you in the audience also have the privilege of working with him during that time. At that time, he was the executive vice provost of Columbia University. And he was also, at the time, one of the leaders in the academic world who really recognized the importance of interdisciplinary research in the universities. And at Columbia, at the time, he founded the now very famous Earth Institute of the Columbia University, introducing the idea of sustainability research. And at that time, some of us, a few of us in Taiwan, also was engaged in setting up research activities of sustainability science in Taiwan. And so many of us had the privilege at the time working closely with Michael and try to establish the foundation of sustainability research in Taiwan. And many of our colleagues are here in the audience this morning. I still remember must be in 1996 or 97, when in Taipei, we had an international conference on climate change. And Michael came and gave us a lecture. It was so inspiring that I think many of us still remembers. And there he introduced to us about sustainable development. And he actually pointed out that this has to be one of the new value system for human society. And as many of you probably know, this year, actually last month, in the Academia Sinica, we established a new institute, a new center for sustainability science in the Academy. And so I was very, very honored and happy to have Professor President Crow here to talk to us about sustainable development and the current global status on the sustainability science research. So let's welcome President Crow.
Thank you for those very kind comments. Can everyone hear me if I said this? No, I'm fine. It works fine. I'm fine. So good morning, everyone. I think it's still morning. So good morning, everyone. I thought what I would try to do today is outline for you the necessity for us to sort of step back a little bit in terms of thinking about this idea of sustainable development, to understand that we are confronting for the first time in our human history both the consequences of our science and the benefits of our science and technology in very significant ways. The way for me to suggest that this is a new era for us is to outline for you that in this year of 2012, we are a group of people sitting in this room who, in the context of human evolution, not just human history, but human evolution, are actually able to consider this question: how might we build human development on a sustainable basis? How might we evolve in a sustainable way? We're actually in a very unique position in the fact that we are facing this challenge/opportunity for the first time. So all of you know the following, but I want to put the context of time and human behavior into perspective, because sustainability is as much about human behavior as it is about natural systems, as it is about built systems, as it is about all of these things together. And so to understand human behavior, we have to understand that our genus, hominid, in an evolutionary sense, in a species sense, has only been around, they estimate, for 83,000 generations. Just think about that for a second. 83,000 generations. We have been evolving and struggling and adapting and evolving and struggling and adapting. If you don't believe in evolution, you won't believe in much of what I'm about to tell you. So we'll just set that to the side, and perhaps we should talk after the meeting. But 83,000 generations of evolutionary forces on our genus, out of which our species emerged. All of us are the same species. All of us emerged in this present form that we are about 5,300 generations ago. This mind that we have, this brain that we have, this capacity to build tools, this capacity to move forward has only existed for 5,300 generations, not very much time. And in those 5,300 generations, we have struggled with an earth that we think of as our mother. At least in Western culture, there's this notion of Mother Earth. I think it also exists in Eastern culture, this notion of Mother Earth, but it's an ever so harsh mother. It's an ever so harsh mother. That is, it's not easy for us to evolve. It hasn't been easy for us to evolve in these last 5,300 years. Of 5,300 generations, of those 5,300 generations of our species, only 8 generations ago, 8 generations ago, did we begin to conceptualize and implement science on a significant scale. Yes, we had scientists maybe back 12 generations. We had conceptualizers of science maybe back 20 generations ago, 30 generations ago, but it was only with the emergence of what's called in Western culture the era of the Enlightenment that we began to understand that the world was not just a force against us or a force that we had to adapt to. It was a series of forces that if we understood them, we could do a better job of adaptation. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, called this enlightenment, and this is very, very important. This was only in the 1780s, so not that long ago. He called it mankind's final coming of age. Now, I don't believe that anything's a final anything, but nonetheless, Kant felt this, and he went on to say, the emancipation of human consciousness from an immature state of ignorance and error. Now, that definitively is the case. The emancipation of human consciousness from an immature state of ignorance and error. And who drives the emancipation process from ignorance and error more than any other group? Scientists, who unravel the way that the earth actually works, the way the universe actually works, the way that energy and matter actually behave, and all of the other things that scientists understand. And those are just the scientists that focus on the physical systems, because now those same scientific methodologies have then been applied to ourselves in our social systems and our own both individual and group behavior. And so for the first time in thousands and thousands and thousands of generations, we sitting in this room today, this actually still floors me to the extent that because we are just who we are and we just live in this moment of time, this brief moment of time that each of us are here, we don't really fully grasp the notion of 83,000 generations in our genus and 5,300 generations in our species. Because it is in fact the experiences that we had in both the evolution through our genus and the expression of our species for 5,300 years that make 5,300 generations that make this notion of sustainable development so difficult to conceptualize. It has been in Western culture the notion of human domination of nature, human mastery of nature, human domination of creatures and other creatures and just whatever. That is the product of the 5,300 generations prior to the scientific enlightenment. Now, 8 generations ago, this enlightenment in Europe, which catalyzed an unbelievable scientific push, an unbelievable focus by humanity on understanding nature, also catalyzed two very important things which resulted in the emergence of the world's first democracy called the United States, the first large-scale democracy. Two founding ideas emerged from this Enlightenment. The first was the Constitution of the United States itself, which said that all people were created equal and all had equal access to liberty and justice, and that there was no person as a function of birth who had any right to have any authority over anyone, ever. And the Constitution was in fact so imperfect that it was only later realized that through civil war, through civil rights, through fighting, through battles, through all of the things that our democracy in the United States has represented, could we move toward the ideal that the Constitution established. But this Constitution established a framework which has now expanded beyond the United States to include Taiwan, operating as a functioning democracy with rights guaranteed to its citizens, with authority allocated on a different kind of basis. I'm just trying to give you some sense of how new all of this is. And the second emergence, 8 generations ago from the same Enlightenment, was this notion written by the Scottish economist Adam Smith in his book, The Wealth of Nations, and that was the role of the invisible hand and the role of capitalism. And so we saw as two products from the Enlightenment the emergence of democracy and capitalism. Only 8 generations ago, in the form that they took in the emergence of the United States. But unfortunately, in that design, in both the U.S. Constitution of 1787 and Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations, in 1776, neither of them had a single utterance about the relationships between our species and the earth. Not a single utterance. Not a single recognition. As if there was no relationship. As if there was no dependence or codependence. As if there was no co-evolutionary set of forces. As a result, the impact of our thousands of generations of ignorance and exploitation actually became empowered by democracy, free will, liberty, science, and capitalism. Just think of that for a second. Those forces, now empowered by the very nature of our species to be exploitive, to be selfish, to be focused on the present. We're now empowered by the very emergence of science, the very emergence of democracy, and the very emergence of capitalism. As a result, we have had, in my view, and all of you know the evidence of this in Taiwan, in the United States, on the mainland, throughout the world, 8 generations of unmitigated exploitation. Unmitigated exploitation. Whatever it takes. Whatever tools, whatever devices, whatever chemicals, whatever molecules, whatever systems to derive energy, we will dig up the entire planet to meet our immediate needs. We will burn every black liquid or black solid that we can find and easily acquire at a low cost, regardless of the consequences of that combustion. Because we need energy. We have, however, in the last 2 or 3 generations, begun the process of setting a new course. Even this topic in this meeting, even you sitting in this room, even the advancement of the new sustainability-oriented research enterprise or institute here in Taiwan, the emergence of even thinking about the notion of taking social scientists and behavioral scientists and physical scientists and natural scientists and saying to them, can we work together or can we find a way to work together to advance sustainable development? Even that is an idea that is impossible to have conceived of as a way for science to move forward even just a few decades ago. So when you think about innovation for sustainable development, this topic, when you think about innovation for sustainability, it is a concept that I am both happy and sorry to say will largely be implemented by people born after 1985, 1990, 1995, and 2000. Meaning one of the key elements in human success is the fact that older generations die. Very important. So that the new generation can take what the older generations have provided as a base of knowledge, particularly in the last 8 to 10 generations, and find new ways to move forward. How many of you know of or have heard of Rachel Carson and her book Silent Spring in the early 1960s, where she outlined the impact of synthetic molecules, synthetic human-derived chemicals on the health and well-being of the environment and the health and well-being of human beings living within that environment. And so in the 1960s, she began pushing the alarm button. Something is amiss. These synthetic chemicals are likely to be, in many cases, mutagenic or carcinogenic. They're likely to infect the ability of organisms to operate in a natural state because they've been influenced so dramatically by synthetic, man-made molecules that we have integrated, that we have injected into the evolutionary sphere and the evolutionary process. Some would argue, I don't buy this argument, that we are but an evolutionary force ourselves, and if our species has been allowed to evolve to the point where we can derive 70,000 synthetic chemicals, and those 70,000 synthetic chemicals have negative impacts on natural evolutionary processes, well, that's not possible because we're a natural evolutionary outcome, so therefore our chemicals are an outcome of us. Only if you think that we're as stupid as a turnip, meaning only if you think that we are incapable of actually understanding our own actions. Even a beaver, does everybody know what a beaver is? It's a big rat-like thing that lives in Canada and the United States. I don't know if they have them in Taiwan, and they build things. They build dams and they modify streams and waterways, and they're at MIT. My wife and my son went to MIT, so they have these rings that are called brass rats. Did anybody go to MIT? So the ring of MIT has a beaver on it. Busy beavers, making things, building things. Even beavers, rats, understand that you cannot build things in certain ways that destroy your own future. Humans have a difficult time attaining the intellectual levels of beavers, I think, often, because we are so tantalized by capitalism, so tantalized by money as the driver only. So innovation for sustainable development must be derived from basically what I characterize as new models, new values, and new perspectives that draw from now the ability for science to help us to understand our fate if we cannot build a sustainable interface between humanity, what we call the built environment, and nature, the natural environment. Nature, by the way, will have a fantastic outcome without us. We're not essential to the success of the natural systems on this planet. We are a product of the natural processes of this planet. And it is likely that those natural systems would do fine without us. So the question is not so much the fate of the earth, it's really the fate of humanity. The fate of humanity. So we need at every level to rethink even how we advance science. We have advanced science in the last few hundred years in strict social constructs. There are those that pursue knowledge about natural systems, those that pursue knowledge about physical systems, those that pursue knowledge about social systems, those that pursue knowledge about behavioral aspects of humanity. We need at every level new philosophy. That is, new philosophy means what is the role of humans? Why is it that we can't integrate sustainability as a core value into the idea of capitalism or into the idea of democracy? If we cannot integrate sustainability as a core value in the idea of democracy or in the idea of capitalism, neither of those ideas will prevail in the long run. They will both be defeated. And given that they are in many ways the best ideas that our humble species has yet to derive for the governance of ourselves and the advancement of human betterment, it's important that we find a way for those ideas to be improved, those ideas being democracy and capitalism. We need new economics. How many of you are economists? Anybody? One, two guys. So we need new economics, three individuals. The old models of just microeconomic theory, where you can just say that the net present value of any object or any investment or anything that you're thinking about has no value beyond what, 80 or 100 years. It means we can't make any decision with any economic capability of understanding that decision that would have an impact longer than 80 or 100 years into the future, which of course is absurd. We're making decisions every day right now relative to man's interaction with the atmosphere that may not have consequences for 200 years, and we can't find an economic tool that will allow us to help address that issue today because such a tool doesn't exist. That's what I mean by new economics. We need new science. The singular approach of fragmented, disconnected science has produced where we are today. And I don't remember if it was Einstein or who that said that if you'd like to have the same outcomes that you have today, keep doing the same thing that you're doing, and you'll have the same outcomes. If you'd like to have a different outcome relative to sustainability, including our focus on how we organize science, then do something different. And so we need innovation in philosophy, innovation in economics, innovation in science. We need integrative approaches to science. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a completely different type of science. We need, obviously, new tools. It's not just about science, but it's about the tools that we build. Just north of here in Japan, they've decided that the tool that we built, called nuclear power, will no longer be a viable means of energy production for the people of Japan going into the future, since they're going to be shutting off all of their nuclear power plants and moving them into closure. All of them. That's a tool. That's the best tool. We were just commenting that there are many complexities relative to our tools, and many ways that we haven't thought through our tools, and many ways where we grow lax relative to our tools, complacent relative to our tools. Because somehow along the way we think, oh, well, we built that and we developed that, and then we just stop. We don't keep emerging it or perfecting it or driving it to new levels of performance or security. We need new ways of teaching. As a university president, I say this repeatedly. We are responsible for producing the people that make some of the most idiotic decisions that humans could possibly make. Let's drill a well at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico under thousands of feet of water, thousands of feet into the earth, and let's just go ahead and do that. And we won't have any mechanisms to take care of it if it blows out. This is the BP problem off the coast of the United States in the Gulf of Mexico. Every single person involved in those decisions were college graduates, master's degrees in engineering and scientists with PhDs in seismology and everything else that you can possibly imagine. Yet they went ahead and made that decision. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Their models were incomplete. Their assessments were incomplete. Their training was incomplete. Something's wrong. I don't know what it is, for sure, but I do know that we need new ways of teaching. If we produce only scientists and engineers, or if we produce scientists and engineers that only think about the narrow focus of the question that they're asked and nothing else, imagine if we encountered disaster after disaster after disaster after disaster. Who knows how many wells there are in the Gulf of Mexico pumping oil right now? This one that blew out, how many are there? Anybody know? Thousands. Thousands and thousands and thousands of these wells. We need new ways of teaching. We need new cities. Think of Taiwan as a super city, one of the largest cities. Given that it's an island, it's easier to think of it as a super city. How many of you think that Taiwan is presently on the path to unbelievable environmental sustainability? Anybody? Everything's great. Everything's right on track. Natural beauty, natural wonder, blue skies, unbelievable fish, unbelievable understanding of the relationship, typhoons that sweep through the country that you're just ready for every time they come, early warning systems for earthquakes that allow intelligent systems of buildings to adapt and shift. Is that all true or hopeful? Hopeful, right? So how do you build these new cities, these new megacities, these places where humans gather in a way where they can be resilient? So everyone here understands that climatic change on this planet is dramatic, powerful, unbelievably unrelenting. I always remind people that the Empire State Building used to be under, if it had existed at the time in the last ice age, the Empire State Building on the island of Manhattan in New York City was under 1,000 feet of ice. Within recent, not even geological history, recent history, 1,000 feet of ice. How do you adapt to that? The scale of these changes, the scale of these impacts. How do you completely reconceptualize cities so that they can have net zero design, so that they can have adaptive and resilient designs? For 6 of the last 8 generations, we have, in my view, had unmitigated exploitation without thought. Rivers in the United States that were so chemically contaminated that they could catch on fire by the drop of a match. That was in Cleveland, Ohio. Air pollution alerts in London, where people were literally dying in the 1950s. Everybody's heard about all this, right? You know about those. 6 generations of unmitigated exploitation without thought. Over on the mainland, when I've been many times to China, I was very shocked the last time I was in Beijing. I never knew there were mountains, because I'd never seen them. This is no joke. I'd been there like 10 times. I'd never seen them until the last time I went. I called my daughter, who's a China scholar, and I said, "There's mountains here." She says, "Yes, Dad, there's mountains there." "Well, how come I've never seen them?" She says, "Well, the air is a little altered." So it might even be more than 6 generations. And then there are people that doubt whether or not we could go for 2 or 3 or 4 more generations at the level of exploitation that we have experienced in the past. So here we have 2 generations now beginning to rethink, beginning to expand our models for ourselves and for our cities, for the way that we teach, the way that we learn, the way that we move forward. And we've had 1 generation of improvement. There are places around the planet where they have implemented new ways of doing things, new logic, new tools, through new understanding, where we've had 1 generation of improvement. But we're just not there. We're just not there yet. So here we are, this generation. So how many people were born after 1980 in this room? A few. Well, it's all up to you guys. Rest of us, we didn't get it done. We weren't fast enough, we weren't smart enough, and you're inheriting a system which is not as adaptive as the 7 billion members of our species living on this planet will require for us to be sustained in a way in which the quality of life for individual humans continues to rise, even at the scale of the population that we have, because you can't snap your fingers and change the population. So here we are, present in this generation, and I think we are trying to do, and even my opportunity to give this talk, we're trying to engage in a way where we create sustainability as a core value. So how many of you are chemists? I know there's a famous chemist here. How many are chemists? We're trained in chemistry, so a few. So in chemistry we study matter, we design molecules, we understand how what we design works. I'll just pose the question, is it possible for us to design molecules which from the time that they are designed have a potentially higher compatibility with natural systems than the molecules that we've designed in the past? So, is it possible? Anybody want to take? Yes, I'm seeing a yes, maybe, yes. Anybody else? Any of the other chemists? It's possible, right? And so, if we create sustainability as a core value, could that as a core value actually alter the way a scientist shapes his or her question? Or is science just an undertaking where you pursue whatever question you want to pursue without any values? There's an American philosopher by the name of Philip Kitcher who's written a book called Science, Truth, and Democracy, in which he says, and this is controversial, but I think that he is making a good point, that science sometimes needs an outcome. What is it working toward? I don't mean a problem to solve. I don't mean directed research. I don't mean applied research. But what is it working toward? What are we unraveling nature for? And can we unravel nature in a particular way that could lead to sustainable development? Because obviously our unraveling of nature up to this point has not led to the level of sustainable development that many now believe that we must have. So, if one creates sustainability as a core value, then that value would then help drive democracies and how they work and how they make decisions, and capitalism on what it values. So how many of you have heard of the triple bottom line? So most bottom lines for companies are profits. What if companies also had as a part of their bottom line sustainability? Well, most capitalists would get up and walk out of the room at that point. Don't tell me that I've got to worry about sustainability because I can't make a profit. Well, what if the design of the value system of the corporation was that you had to make a profit and find a way to make a profit with sustainability as an objective? And so this notion of creating sustainability as a core value is intended to affect science and how it's done. Not all of science, but some. Technology and why it's made. Democracy and how it's implemented. And capitalism and what it produces. Now, most people, when I get this far in the lecture, they just throw their hands up. I mean, this guy's a lunatic. We can't change these things. Those forces are too powerful. Well, I don't know. I mean, science came along just a few generations ago after thousands of generations of ignorance and put us onto a path where the world that we have today is infinitely better than the world that has ever existed for humans in the past. So we've gotten that far, but now we see that there are limits. And so we have to come back at ourselves and rethink who we are and what we are and how we work and what we do. So how do we find a way to move the concept of science and technology and innovation to be from and with nature, as opposed to nature to be a thing that's exploited? And just think about that for a second. Can we find a way where science and democracy and capitalism, but let's just focus on science and innovation, can be with nature as the guide? I often use this analogy of a tree. A tree. Trees are beautiful. Low temperature, naturally replicative systems that do work, process energy, communicate. It's an unbelievably elegant system. The natural systems that surround us are unbelievably elegant. I think it was Thomas Edison who took a very crude approach to engineering, which was trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. Said that he would know that science has advanced when human beings can construct a single blade of grass. We can't construct a blade of grass that can operate and do what a blade of grass can do. We can't do that yet. We're working in that direction, but we can't do that yet. When that blade of grass grows, it has ways to communicate, ways to replicate, and when the blade of grass has lived its life, what happens to it? It's just recycled back into the natural system. And so are there ways for us to change innovation from natural system exploitation to natural system based? So, where are we? What's the result of these ideas? In my view, the result is all of us in this room, whether we were born before 1985 or 1980 or after, is that the weight of history is upon us. We are the first elements of our species in 5,300 generations to actually be able to pose the question that I'm putting on the table and think about how we could organize our knowledge enterprises, our teaching enterprises, in a different way to achieve a different outcome. What we've done the last few generations is that we've just taken advantage of science. We've used science to help us, and it's helped us immensely, and it's the most powerful thing imaginable. But now we know that there are multiple consequences, positive and negative, for our science. And so we sit in this room, in this actual discussion, in a place, Taiwan, that's actually seriously taking on these issues with the new sustainability initiatives, with projects that Taiwan is involved in, like the Future Earth Project. We are beginning to emerge in certain places of the world, and Taiwan has huge opportunity here to focus on what I call outcome-driven science as an addition to traditional discovery-based science. And when I'm using the term science, I'm using social science, physical science, behavioral science, and natural science together as science, all areas equal. Outcome sciences, outcome-driven science, back to the philosopher Phil Kitcher, he would say that without an outcome that you're attempting to work toward, he would say, this is not my words, but his words, that unraveling nature alone by itself is insufficient as a motivation for science. That science without an outcome in mind, science without some thing that actually helps the species to evolve through just beyond knowledge of nature. He actually classified that as not immoral, and this is a complicated two words in English. There's immoral and amoral, and they have very different meanings. So immoral means doing something that isn't moral, and amoral means it's without moral basis. And he would argue that science without purpose is amoral. And he would also argue that some science must have a moral purpose. And the moral purpose of some of our science must be sustainable development as an outcome. So an outcome-driven science is where one says, we would like to be able to have an understanding of nature, an understanding of human behavior, an understanding of physical systems, natural systems, behavioral systems, and social systems, such that we could construct pathways to provide for long-term evolutionary success of human beings. That's an outcome-oriented science. To approach an outcome-oriented science around the idea of sustainability requires integration. Physicists and chemists and economists and political scientists and psychologists, biologists, ecologists, and others all coming together and saying, here's what we need to evolve as a sustainable science, as the science of sustainability, an outcome-oriented science. Now, Taiwan is in a fantastic position to take leadership, global leadership in this space. Many universities, scholars as highly regarded in the culture. This facility here at the National Academy. Mechanisms that you have to adjust and link, and bring sciences together. Driven partly by your own sustainability reality, which is in front of one's face all the time. Is this present environment, this is true in the United States also, so I'm not picking on Taiwan. Is this present environment, is this present human existence sustainable? Most people's gut instinct is no. It isn't. So therefore, you must step back and think about the outcome that is desired. If the outcome is sustainable development and we don't have the tools or the understanding, we must step back and reapproach our science in an integrated way. It doesn't take away from traditional disciplines. It doesn't mean you want to go in and blow up chemistry or blow up physics or eliminate these disciplines. It's not about that. It's that they are insufficient. And in a sense, science as an effort must evolve also for our species to be successful, for sustainable development to be attained. What I can tell you is that at the university that I am a part of, we are involved in a project within our single institution to try to accomplish many of these objectives. We have created a Global Institute of Sustainability. It has 265 faculty members involved in that institute from all the disciplines that you can possibly imagine, where we're trying to find ways, if you bring these people together in different ways, can you solve problems or gain understanding or develop tools or develop mechanisms that can help to produce sustainable outcomes. We've created a school of sustainability with a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD. It is an integrated science tool. And we listen to some people in chemistry and some people in physics and some people in engineering and some people in economics, and other people say, well, all the kids that are in that program, you're doing a disservice to them. They need to be grounded in a discipline or they'll be weak. And we're like, well, how would you know? Since you're grounded in a single discipline, how would you know? So we have a number of arguments over these things. So what we're saying is we're not taking away from any of the core disciplines, but we were, in a sense, creating a new integrated learning environment, a new teaching environment, new ways to conceptualize problems, new ways to design ourselves academically and intellectually. Now, for whatever reason, in medicine, we've never had these issues. We create schools of medicine like there's no tomorrow. We create new disciplines in medicine like there's no tomorrow. We integrate, we do this. You might come from chemistry, you might come from physics, you might come from biology, you might come from engineering. Some of you will be scientists, some will be physicians, some will be engineers, some will be all together. We think nothing of it because medicine is an outcome integrated science. Still more of an art, but nonetheless, that's what it is. And it's focused on our individual health. We've never constructed anything focused on our collective health. Sustainability science is that. Sustainability science is a construct of ours that has the intellectual capability or capacity to actually focus on the collective outcome. It cannot be approached by the disciplines in isolation. We already know that. So you have to move past it. So here in Taiwan, you have unbelievable opportunity to become world leaders in an outcome-oriented science called sustainability science, with an outcome-oriented objective called sustainable development, in an unbelievably complex, isolated place called an island. You have this advantage. Being an island, you can say, well, we got water all the way around us. Let's just see what happened inside the water. The world has yet to evolve the place where integrated sustainability science is the way in which the society is advancing. That has not yet occurred. That means the world still has that need. And this is a society filled with unbelievable scientists, unbelievable engineers, unbelievable thinkers, unbelievably focused individuals, a high, what I call scholarly acceptance index. Scholars are more highly regarded in Taiwan than they are in the US, let me tell you. We got too much TV, too much pizza. And so I think what I'd like to close with before we turn to questions, I'd like to close with this notion of evolution. 5,300 generations of our species, 8 generations of science, 2 generations of struggle, 1 generation of change. Things accelerating and moving faster and faster and faster. And so the question I have is, who will step up? What group of academics will step up with a new construct for science? At our university, we're trying. but we're one university. The whole country, that's another matter, which is where you all are. So you have the opportunity to step up. Sustainable development is a necessary achievement for humans, not yet achieved. It's a necessary achievement for the future, not yet achieved. By reconceptualizing actually how we do the things that we do, we might be able to achieve it in time. Unknown yet, but it's worth the effort. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, President Crow, and I think we have time for questions.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned capitalism and democracy.
Yes.
And you briefly mentioned capitalism and democracy. You briefly mentioned 7 billion people and still growing. And I think what we should all be aware of that these very intelligent people that you refer to, these very promising ideas that you refer to, are really restricted to maybe just 1% of this 7 billion. And so I'm wondering how far we can drive education to bring these ideas to the remaining 99.x%, and whether we can achieve sustainability with that many people on the planet. We have some perspective on that.
Right. So I don't want to argue your 1% point, because I think the point is the same whether it's 1% or 10% or whatever. So I think that but it's not 1%. And so it's a little higher than that, but the point is the same. So the question is sustainability with large numbers. So Joel Cohen wrote a book several years ago called How Many People Can the Earth Support? It's a fantastic book by a population demographer out of Rockefeller University. And he says that that's the wrong worry. Population numbers are the wrong worry. I mean, you know that, and I'm not arguing for massive population growth, but you could take every single human being alive today and fit them side by side inside the city of Los Angeles. You could give all of them a yard and a house and fit them into the state of Texas. And so it is not how many humans there are, it's what those humans do. And so this notion that somehow the mechanism for control is to shrink numbers and that somehow then our sustainability, we consume resources at this unbelievable level on a per person basis. Your accent is Northern European, and so you're familiar with that consumptive nature, and as an American we're like gluttons in terms of consumption. And so it's not, I think, so much the issue of numbers of people. It is the issue of education of people making decisions. And so within our own Global Institute of Sustainability, the area that we believe that we are the weakest in relative to scientific understanding is actually human behavior. And so what is it about humans? In fact, I wrote an article a few years ago called The Limits of Us, and then I had a variant of that article called None Dare Call It Hubris, where I was outlining 9 limiting factors of human character and human design that make sustainability difficult to attain. We do not have the ability to understand the impact of large numbers. We do not have the ability to think long term in the past or in the future. Different things that are just inherent in the way that we are. And so how do we take education, and that's why I said new ways of teaching, and change the very way that we teach? And so it really is a comprehensive undertaking that must be carried out. And so it would be nice if we had 1% of the Earth's population is 70 million people. If we had 70 million highly educated leaders, that could be an unbelievably powerful group of individuals. We don't have that. And so we're not even at that level. So on that level, I do agree. And so that's why I'm arguing for a comprehensive approach, the changing of all universities. So I was one of the university presidents in the United States that decided with 650 others, I was one of the original 5, that we would move our university to demonstrate carbon neutrality in our own operations, how we operated the university itself. And so we are on a carbon neutrality plan, not because carbon neutrality is the panacea that will save all things, but not because our carbon footprint is particularly acute. It's because our student footprint is particularly acute. So we have taken sustainability as a core objective, and we're trying to integrate it into the curriculum, not of some students, but all students. In addition to the sustainability exercise, in addition to the sustainability school, we've put in 17 megawatts of solar power on our way to 40 megawatts of solar power. We'll have our entire daytime grid off-grid, no consumption of electricity except through solar electric systems. And so we're doing everything that we possibly can to take sustainability as an objective and to inculcate it into the full educational experience. Now, we graduate 18,000 students a year, and we're growing the number of graduates to 25,000 per year. And so 25,000 new graduates per year, if there were another 50 universities that did that, or another 100 universities, or 500 universities, or however many, it would alter this equation. So it's not that we don't have educated people, we have educated ignoramuses. So they're highly educated in narrow areas, but they don't understand this issue of sustainability. So they're educated in one space and ignorant in another. I think there are ways for institutions to have dramatic impacts. Or for places like Taiwan, if you look at a place like Taiwan, if Taiwan became the centerpiece for sustainability for the rest of the world to see, if it became a net zero island, if it changed all of the ways that it did things, and then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that's how you learn on the global scale. So you see how things work. You see, can you make all of that work? So it's all those things together.
Democracy like the U.S. or Taiwan, how overcome political hurdles in order to pursue sustainable energy for development policies, especially with the U.S. presidential elections over 1 week away.
Yes.
And the economic issues taking the center stage. Do you foresee better prospects in bipartisan or across the aisle collaboration in pursuing these policies in the next 4 years?
Right. So I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist, and so no individual election can discourage me from my optimism, and so including this one. And so at the end of the day, most of us in this room are academics or are a part of the academy or a part of the academic enterprise or the knowledge-producing enterprise. Most of us in this room are a part of that enterprise. So one thing that we have to do sometimes is think about, what do we do? So one thing I try to do is I try not to worry too much about all of the political stuff around me, because I realize that I have a very important assignment. So my job as a university president is to help create with our faculty and our students a knowledge enterprise which is adaptive, which is creative, which is not the status quo, doesn't produce the status quo, it has no intention of protecting the status quo. And so if we want to have the greatest effect that we possibly can, we have to worry about what we do ourselves and not so much what other people do. Because deep down inside this academy or inside my university, nobody really tells us what to do. We get to decide what to do. We get to decide what intellectual journeys we will go on, what intellectual challenges we will take. And if that's so, then the thing that we should be doing is changing the knowledge that we produce. The politicians merely take the options that we provide them. If we have provided them insufficient options, they won't take them. If we have educated them in a way where they do not understand the role of human-induced climate change, and they're ignorant of that, that's because we've allowed them, we the academy, to be ignorant. We haven't provided a way to educate them. We haven't educated them enough. We haven't found a way to take people that don't understand this or don't understand that and to give them a tool or a mechanism to understand it. And so I'm a big believer that the solutions lie mostly by looking in the mirror. That the academy must look in the mirror and say, why have we produced senior politicians? I'll pick on the United States. This guy, Rick Perry, who was running for president of the United States, he's the governor of Texas. He thinks that the earth is 6,000 years old, and he thinks that global climate change is a hoax put on him by scientists. Well, I don't know what college he went to, but he should just give his degree back. And so something in the way that we do what we do helps to contribute to that. So then I say to myself, well, what can I do about that? Well, let's see, we can build a school of sustainability. We can build sustainability as an academic theme for every student that goes to our institution. We can make our institution have a sustainability outcome. We can say we're going to go to climate neutrality. We can build residence halls that have students working in maintaining the sustainability of the school. We can build metabolic maps so that individual dormitories can be competing against each other to try to lower the carbon footprint of their, and I can keep going on and on and on and on with these. I can do that. We can hire people in science, like green chemists who are thinking in different ways. We can build research institutes that break down the barriers between the departments and the schools. We can do that. We can work on teams that can derive new forms of life through algae that can derive new types of energy. We can do that. And so I don't worry about these political things. I just don't worry about them. They are merely a reflection of how ignorant we are. And it really is the case that we determined that. I actually would say that we have contributed to it. We literally, we don't even have like-mindedness within the academy. I'll go back to our economist friends over here. We have like really, really, really antiquated, weak tools in economic analysis. So at ASU, we've decided to go out and hire every human being we can find that has a massive brain attached to their body focused on ecosystem service economics. How can we change economic models relative to the role of nature in providing ecosystem services? So we hired Mike Hanneman from Berkeley. We hired Kerry Smith from North Carolina State and other economists that we brought in to try to change things. That's what we can do. That's what this academy can do. That's what universities can do.
We're talking about sustainability. Brundtland did define what is sustainability and seemed to be accepted by many people, and said to satisfy essential need of this generation, not to compromise the next generation. And I do have some problem with that kind of concept, because when you said essential need, people from Africa will ask the question, what do you mean by essential need? Our essential need, or the essential need of
U.S. or
some other people, right? And that's right. So when we're talking about sustainability, it is a global problem.
Yes.
And when we say essential, and what is essential, and that's the question. So you are talking about Taiwan to be sustainable. And I do believe 50 years or 100 years from now, if we work hard, we will be in the kind of situation we don't need to depend on the fossil fuel, we depend on sunshine. But even entire growth becomes sustainable, Taiwan will have an extremely difficult time, mainly because of the population density.
Mm-hmm.
So when US said, okay, we can depend on sunshine, Taiwan is only getting 1/20 of average US citizen is getting.
Mm-hmm.
So you can convince us that, okay, you
Yeah.
can live with 1/20, so then we might.
Yeah, so sustainability is one of these things where I think that general concept of intergenerational equity. Thank you. Intergenerational equity is an important element of that concept. Why should we, in the United States, if you buy a piece of property in West Virginia and strip mine the top of a mountain off, eliminating the entire forest and leave a hole producing acid mine drainage that drains out, if you paid for the land, that's fine. It's crazy. And so this notion of intergenerational equity, right now what I guess I would say is that our definitions are reflective of our lack of understanding. So even our definition of sustainability is likely to change over time. And it's not robust enough, it's not varied enough. And so I think my own view of the definition is that it has to do with the relationship between the built environment and the natural environment. And then it's the adaptive, it's allowing for the natural adaptive capacity of the system of the systems that have evolved on Earth to be maintained while we live amongst them. And there are alternative ways that could be achieved. If a net zero society could be built in Taiwan, for instance, on this island, it's possible. It's technologically possible. It's not economically feasible. It's technologically possible. If that could be done, then perhaps the relationship between the built environment and the natural environment from the 23 million people that live here could be altered for the trajectory of the life that the 23 million people want to have here, because it's this overuse, overconsumption, or misuse of the natural environment that is the question of sustainability, as opposed to only this intergenerational equity. It's all those things together. So I think that it's a fluid definition, because we're still only in the first few decades of understanding this right now. We have some way to go to understand it. So I think it will evolve.
Well, if I said that the sunshine is giving us lots of energy and recycled material, so in a sense that the sunshine is providing all the things which human society needs. We
Yes.
are part of the nature. We evolve under the sunshine in the nature.
Yes.
So now what we are doing is we are consuming a lot more. Human society is consuming a lot more than what sunshine is giving us.
Mhm.
Ability to recycle
Yes.
in the tune of 1.5 times.
Mhm.
So in that sense, we are overdeveloped.
Well, in that sense, we are overdeveloped in the way that our technological framework is
Yeah.
working. So we are if you look at human capital, natural capital, and financial capital, we are drawing down the base of natural capital
Yeah.
in a way where our net global economic
Destroyed.
well-being is being deteriorated
Yes.
over some period of time, because our technological foundation is too inefficient.
Yeah.
And so what we do know, going back to nature again, is that there are life forms that are infinitely more efficient in the conversion of photons into work than us. So there are bacteria that are unbelievably efficient. There are algae that are unbelievably efficient, and other organisms and other things. And we just haven't devoted enough time or energy to understanding how nature is able to work. I think if we went through those calculations, going back to the earlier comment, we went through all that new sort of science and that new kind of conceptualization, and then we realized that even with these new approaches and so forth, we were still in a deficit. Then we would have to rethink how many of us there are. Then we definitely would have to rethink that. And you might rethink that anyway, just to sort of buy a cushion, almost like a hedge, while you try to work these things out. But I think that what we haven't done, I mentioned yesterday at ITRI, the notion of one idea that we have at ASU, that we would welcome opportunities to work with folks in Taiwan. It's not so much how much sunshine is delivered to Taiwan, but there are mechanisms by which one could build economic platforms that are driven by photons. So photons are being delivered. There are ways to convert those photons into electrons. There's ways to convert them into molecules. There's ways for those molecules to take on the form of proteins, to take on the form of medicine or food or a range of other things. There's ways to take photons and using water and carbon dioxide to convert a photon, literally a photon, water and carbon dioxide as your only ingredients, through a Fischer-Tropsch process to produce methanol as a fuel. So there's ways to have differentiated liquid fuels. And so all those things are insufficiently understood and insufficiently focused on, that we don't even know yet what our holding capacity would be for human beings at the present standard of consumption that might exist in Taiwan or the United States. Less in Taiwan than the United States because of energy consumption differences. But what I think is that these are all the questions. This is what we have to figure out what to do. And you can't go to a department of physics and say to the brilliant physicist, well, what do you do? That's insufficient. You need everybody there to focus on
that. Would you also share with us your experience with the Earth Institute at Columbia, which I'm sure it's a pioneering idea and practice? You see, I'm an earth scientist.
Mm-hmm. So I went to Columbia in 1990, and by 1992, with the Rio meeting that was focusing on the future of the Earth, we looked around at our various aspects and we realized that we had this thing called the Lamont Doherty Geological Observatory. We had a mining engineering department, we had this department, a school of public health, we had chemists, we had all these people working in these different ways, and we realized that none of them were coordinated and none of them were focused on any kind of outcome. They were just focused on understanding the Earth. So we began internal efforts. We renamed the Lamont Doherty Geological Observatory the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. We infused more people being brought into that observatory who had a broader perspective, Earth systems science perspective, as opposed to just seismology or or geochemistry or whatever the area happened to be. We began making internal investments in the university. These were through my office. We began making internal investments in the university to build bridges and connections through projects, taking public health and earth science and linking them together, taking business and putting people in the business school and linking them from behavioral science perspectives. We took an old mining engineering program that was a completely antiquated department that was achieving nothing. It had a massive endowment. They had no students. It was completely worthless. But the faculty were just holding on to some kind of sociological construct that was of value to them. We dismantled that. We took the mining engineering program away and we built a program built around earth engineering and the concept of earth systems engineering. So just imagine, I won't walk you through it all, but we were working across about 30 or 40 different fronts in the university. We created then a series of initiatives tying people together by making investments around projects where you could break down disciplines by having people work on these projects. And then eventually we then began building new entities. So we worked with folks here in Taiwan and Brazil and other places to build the International Research Institute for Climate and Society. How could you make climate predictions related to social outcomes, not just maps of rainfall or heat variability going forward, but actual impacts on socially important or economically important things. We began acquiring other entities and attracting them to build this Earth Institute. Then we began putting in layers of legal and policy components and more scientists from other areas and psychologists in other areas trying to shape all of that together. So all of that work, it took 11 years inside the university to ultimately construct that institute and launch it. I was the director. I was the previous director before Jeff Sachs, the present director, as one of my assignments at Columbia. And so the lesson learned from that was the unbelievable rigidity of the academic, the unbelievable rigidity, the unbelievable inability for people to, I mean, I used to referee fights between geochemists and ecologists, with geochemists referring to ecologists as cretins, because they didn't have mathematical tools to understand those things that they were system level ecologists were just, anybody a system level ecologist? Okay, so there's no cretins here, and so there was fighting and embittered fighting and arguing and cultural differences between even disciplines within subdisciplines within disciplines, different approaches in the ways that problems were conceptualized and problems were solved. And so what it took to make all of those things happen was to reorient the nature of the question, the nature of the problems that people might be able to work on together. Now that didn't mean that in the case of our geologists you abandoned geology as a subject. You didn't do that. You just allowed it to not be self-constraining. So it didn't mean every geochemist had to work with a public health person, but some could. Some should be allowed to and not be punished by the others. And so we tried to change also the value system for what was considered, and we do this at ASU now also because we constantly have the person who will stand up and say, well, this person didn't contribute to the fundamental understanding of chemistry, so therefore this person should never be tenured. But they solved this other problem. Well, I don't care about that problem. I only care about these problems. Well, what about this problem that couldn't have been solved without them? And so we had to then alter also what was the assessment of contribution, the assessment of academic impact. And so it's very complicated, and it takes a certain amount of energy in the organization being devoted only to that purpose. And I will tell you, having done that, it's somewhat of a thankless job. Because at the end of the day, if you are able to get it all glued together, no one ever knows how it got glued together, not that it makes a difference. And it just got glued together, and isn't it wondrous how it all works? And you just look at it and you say, next project. So you move on.
I pretty much answered my question. I had in mind. Answer the question. It's not the easy one. It's tough.
Yes.
Developing the science of sustainability.
Very tough.
I still recall the fond memory we visited with the delegation to your biosphere 2.
Mhm.
That was 15 years ago.
Right.
Inside. Now my question is, to the students, you create a creature.
Yes.
A new students, a new creature of a student
Yes.
who are enrolled in your College of Science, Sustainable Science.
Right.
What kind of student are they?
So it's interesting. They tend to be individuals who have a desire to. They're like people that want to go to medical school, in the sense that they're like people who want to be helpful relative to what they perceive to be a really important human challenge. And some are scientists and some are engineers trained as undergraduates. Some are hybrids. They're economists and engineers together, or economists and chemists in the same person. Some are purely driven by they're only interested in issues related to sustainability. All other things are subservient to that. So they're strictly disciplinary, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and post-disciplinary. They're all those people together. They seem mostly driven by the problem. And that is the idea to create, for instance, there are a group of them that are in philosophy. So they see the weaknesses in present philosophy. Philosophies, in Western philosophies in particular, that call for exploitation of the earth, as opposed to some Eastern philosophies that don't, or Native American philosophies that don't. And so how do you then rethink and redrive and move forward new kinds of philosophies? So there are many people that are interested in being transformative in their logic or transformative in their science. And then a number of our faculty not involved say, well, these people will never get jobs. And we say, well, we don't bring people to the university to give them jobs. That isn't our purpose. We'd like them to get jobs so that they don't complain, but we're not there so that it's not like the sustainability school is a trade school. But it is also the case that our students have been able to secure important jobs, various jobs, in not-for-profits, inside corporations, inside governments. Some working as scientists, some working as planners, some working as writers, some working as thinkers, all those things. And so for us, that part of our effort has gone well. That we're very happy with the progress that we've made at the school at ASU.
Is undergraduate or graduate?
Both. Yes. So we have BS, BA, I think, MS, and PhD.
Well, I'm afraid that our time is really up, and I was hoping that in the future you'll come back more often, not for another 10 years or
Okay.
so. And with your planned collaboration with ITRI and some maybe academic Sinica, for sure. We'll be here more often.
I'm happy. It only took like 24 hours to get here, and I'm going back tomorrow. So.
So let's thank President Carl again.